Well, it is a major challenge speaking after the two major speakers who spoke before me, my predecessors. But I'd like to say that it is an honor, it is a privilege for me being here, speaking to you, being listened to our Minister Teresa, the panelists, and Jorge, Adele, and other people who cooperate so much with us. And we're all part of a very long journey. I am very pleased to have participated in this journey. And when in 20 or 40 or 50 years, I will be very pleased to look back and think I participated in this. I participated in the overcoming of extreme poverty in my country. Is it going to be possible? Will I be able to tell myself in 50 years that I was part of a generation that participated in the overcoming of extreme poverty in the world? I believe so, but it does depend on several things, particularly on how we define poverty. I believe that our President, Dilma Rousseff, is a very bold woman, a very intelligent woman. 4 years ago, I believe that under the inspiration and advisory of her Ministry of Social Development, 4 years ago, she decided to establish as a target in Brazil the eradication of extreme poverty, not in a but in a thought of manner. She established several conditions and definitions for this target, and a deadline, 4 years, a tool through which this would be achieved, which is cash transfer programs related to generation of opportunities, improvement of social infrastructure, and obviously also a cash transfer program. And a decree was issued in 2010. One thing was missing, a quantitative definition of the target. But luckily enough, our partners, multilateral partners, the World Bank and UNDP, suggested that 3% would be a good definition of a target, and I agree with them completely. Therefore, we now have a full definition of the challenge that we have ahead of us, how we're going to address it, etc. And where did we find the 70% line? At the time, it was the lower threshold of the target. It was between 70 and 140. And the floor, 70, came from a previous program called Bolsa Família, which came from Fome Zero, another program. Bolsa Família is almost 12 years old. The line was 50 at the time. It was close to $1, which today is 1.25 of the World Bank, and very close to the nutritional thresholds calculated by economists working with poverty. Therefore, Fome Zero, the thresholds, the floors, have some identification between poverty and hunger and nutrition and the ability to feed oneself. This is not a novelty, it is not an invention. Sonia Rocha gave me a book one day, which is very precious by Benjamin Mountain, published in 1901 in the UK, based on research in the city of York in England, in the UK. It's all there. We think we invent the word, but it's all there. And there is a very clear identification that someone who is poor is someone who does not have the money to eat. And all the methodologies are in this book, dated back to 1901. So discussing a world without poverty means discussing a world where nobody wakes up with hunger without knowing where the next meal is going to be. I have 2 children, 4 and 9-year-olds, and I am never concerned whether or not they are going to eat that day. Where is the food going to come from? This is not a concern. And according to Mr. Kaushik, 1 billion people in the world do face this problem every day. They wake up and they do not know how they are going to feed themselves or their children, and this is totally unacceptable. And I believe that when we speak about the possibility of a world without poverty and the type of world we're going to have, we need to be very clear about this link between poverty and hunger, poverty and not knowing where your next meal is going to come from. Obviously, I am advocating a monetary metric to poverty, and obviously the next question is, do you want to fight with James Foster? Not exactly, but I will talk about now multidimensionality. Yes, money is important, but time is essential, freedom, services are all essential. But yes, money is also essential. But one of the reasons why I like to live in Brasília is because I spend 20 minutes to go to work and 20 minutes back. If I lived in São Paulo, this would take me 2 hours, and time is life. This is true to everybody. So the multi-dimension in our lives is something that is not subject to questioning, I believe. The question is poverty especially multidimensional, more than the rest of our lives? One other way to posing this question is, someone who is poor, in the definition I just mentioned, someone who does not have money to buy food, and a person who does not have water. Will this person be someone who is hungry without water, or will this be more urgent? I believe that for us to answer this question, we are able to answer in many different ways. One would be a technocratic one, when we would say, well, my function of social well-being is not just additive. It is not just income plus water. It has a multiplication function. If this is the case for the poor, not having water is more serious, more severe than for other people who do not have water. But this is plausible, but too theoretical. One can say, in a second approach, that, well, not per principle, but as Teresa mentioned, an empirical regularity is that the poor people are the last ones to have anything. Water, education, access to health. So I'm not asking myself about details, the function of social well-being, is it interactive or not. I'm just going to say, given this empirical regularity, in my policy, I am going to prioritize access to services to the poor, because I know that through statistics and through my experience that they are the last ones to have anything. Thirdly, we could face the question in terms of a moral imperative. We could say, well, it is bad enough not having water. It is bad enough being hungry. But for someone who is poor, it is especially bad not having water, because their means are scarcer. And I agree with all three approaches. I have no problem with them. They're all sound. But they all say poverty is multidimensional, and it is more multidimensional, quote unquote, than if the person is poor. And why am I emphasizing this idea of monetary measurement of poverty, and in a way complaining about following the multidimensional approach? First of all, There's something conceptual. When you build an index that is multidimensional, I beg your pardon, it is no longer multidimensional because it is an index. Even if it is fantastic. And yes, Jodie Foster is brilliant, but you are collapsing several dimensions. And we are in a unidimensional world where it is not clear what you mean. We all know, everyone who lives in Brazil knows what is 1 real, what is 70 reals. And of course, someone who lives like me, 1 real does not have the same value that it has to someone who is poor. It is just not the same. 1 real for me or for someone who lives in poverty. In any case, the value of money is in people's minds. People know what it means. The value of an index is much more ethereal and difficult to understand. Therefore, I believe in the wisdom of our president in choosing a clear line to poverty. There's one second problem I see, which is agency. I work with Senarc, the secretariat in charge of implementing Bolsa Família. They are very good. I think they are very impressive. They can manage a huge and complex program very well. They know how to do the single registry. They coordinate with municipalities, with the Federal Reserve, many details of how to do things and how to carry out cash transfer. They dominated it in a very significant manner. But Cenário does not know a lot about pedagogy, schools, let's say, health units, and therefore the approach that we had in Bolsa Família is correct. At no time we said that poverty is not multidimensional and that it is not important. Multidimensionality. But we made it very clear that when we define poor, we define that person through income. And there are other programs that we hold in partnership with other secretariats and other ministries. Therefore, Senarc does not build health units or schools. And this is a correct approach, and it is easy to carry out when there is a monetary measure of poverty, but you consider multidimensionality of poverty as something important. We carry out a poverty profile or dashboard or something, many ways of referring to this. And I advocate that this should be the correct approach. It is the right one for Brazil and for most of the world. If we address the challenge of fighting extreme poverty and also its multidimensionality. One last practical program is that for us to change the monetary approach to the multidimensional indexes, in addition to disaggregation, we're going to have a poverty line for each dimension, and it's hugely difficult to establish a poverty line for the poverty line in a unidimensional manner. Many people participated, Sônia Rocha, Marcelo Neri, many people, Fernando Geiger, Ana Peliano, several of us in IPEA discussed what was the best poverty line, in monetary terms, in nutritional terms. Thank God. President Dilma just said, yes, discussion was good, but I read everything, but it is going to be 70. And I think this was brilliant. It was excellent because it was very difficult to reach this number. And I think that if we are going to go through the multidimensional approach, we're going to have one for each dimension, and it's not going to be easy. I think you now know what I think about multidimensionality. Yes, it is important, life is multidimensional, but for indexes, I don't believe it is a good idea for poverty line, maybe for other things. I also would like to emphasize that I do not believe, and I'm talking about in principle, but there is another approach that is similar to multidimensional approach, which is using multidimensionality or an index or a compound index as proxy for income. This is a completely other thing, and I have no conceptual problem with it. The idea is we want to measure income, but there is volatility. We don't know exactly what is the income of poor, less poor, more poor, poorer, less poor. So we're going to have people having strategic behaviors. Even though I have to say that we have seen very little of this. We are giving money to 15 million families based on their income, their declared income. And we do not see an avalanche of strategic behaviors. As an economist, I'm actually surprised with this, but there are several arguments towards or pro using indexes that are proxies of the monetary income, predictors. And I am not talking about them. I am talking about the idea of having an index on the actual idea of multidimensionality. So going back to the idea of the world without poverty. So let's get out of Brazil and go to the world. I agree with Marta when she said yesterday that we have a very a more or less good program. We still have a lot of implementation details to improve, but roughly it is a good design which can be an example to other countries in the world. We can think, now that we're easy to achieve our 3% target, it is important to say that we have not played the game yet. The idea was for us to reach this target at the end of President Dilma's administration and not in 2013. So we have another PNAD coming, another household survey coming, and we're going to see whether or not we achieve the target. But we're very close to achieving this target, and we may think, just a parenthesis, we're close to reaching this target at a very low cost. Bolsa Família accounts for a little bit more than 0.5% of the GDP. So I do agree that there is fiscal restrictions, and next year is going to be difficult, but this fiscal restriction means choices. And we can think the following. We may think we have achieved the 70 reais target, and why can't we be more ambitious and raise the bar more along the lines of $2 a day? It is idea, well, I don't want to pressure anyone, but we may think about it, increasing our efforts against poverty. But going back to what I was saying, we do have a target that is easily feasible for countries that are similar to ours. Malaysia, South Africa, China, etc., and many of them have followed the same journey as we did. And there are intelligent people everywhere, good policies everywhere, but if we're talking about a world without poverty, and both Magdi and Mr. Basu mentioned, Brazil is not Brazil upwards, but there are countries much poorer than us in the country, in the world, I beg your pardon. The fact that we have technology and the fact that Brazil and many countries have shown that it is possible to not make it easy for people trying to eradicate poverty in Mozambique, in Afghanistan, etc. In poorer countries, achieving cash transfers that would bring everyone to $1.25 a day may not be within their budgets. We're not talking about 0.5% of their GDP, we're talking about a lot of money. Therefore, the Brazilian solution for extreme poverty, is it feasible for someone poor in Haiti or in Mozambique? Or we can only say, yes, it is feasible, but only after they have a good growth for 20 years. It is a solution, but not a very good one. So we need to think a bit about what Magdi mentioned. Assistance given by wealthier countries. Even Brazil is a donor. We receive assistance, but we are also, well, at a lower extent, but we do also donate to countries that are poorer than us. Yesterday I was searching in the internet, and there is no agreement in terms of the types of assistance, but we're talking about something about a few hundreds of $billion per year. It is not trivial. It is a lot of money. And it's not my area, I never studied this, but many people criticize the way this assistance is carried out. Budget support sometimes given in the hands of governments that are not transparent, given to projects where I have to buy something from the donor. There are some criticisms. I don't know if they're fair or not, but if we do have a large amount of money donating or disbursed by wealthier countries, and if we have at least an idea that a part of this money could be better used, my question is, can we not use considerable amount of this money to do something similar to a global Bolsa Família? Can we use these flows and say, okay, the approaches used are okay, but if we're serious about eradicating extreme poverty in 10 years, 20 years, or something like this, of course, the economy of Mozambique is going to have to grow, and Haiti as well, but we can suggest that wealthier countries participate. They can donate and say, we're going to use money to do something that is similar to a global Bolsa Família. Of course, the details are not trivial. We would need to have good partners. The operation generated or managed, I beg your pardon, by Luis Henrique is not trivial. It is not trivial here, it's not trivial in Mozambique, but it is something we need to think about. I'm ignoring disasters, wars, epidemics, not because they are not important, but because I am not competent to talk about them. I know that Ebola is something huge, and there's no way of fighting poverty in an Ebola-stricken country. And we can talk about many poor countries that have some sort of governance, some level of governance that could do something like this. And as Kaushik mentioned, if we inject too much money in poor countries, we may have problems with incentives, etc. This is all true, but I believe that countries as like Brazil have shown that this is viable. We are able to eradicate extreme poverty. Yes, this worked here, it worked in Mexico. We can have a monetary index and we give them money if they're below that established target. And one last thing I'd like to mention is the idea of inequality. Inequality and poverty are not necessarily the same thing. They go hand in hand, but they are not the same thing. Something that concerns me is that inequality is reducing in our countries, but in most part of the world, it is a concern of mine that inequality is increasing. And I think that we are able to eradicate extreme poverty in a relatively little time if we use mechanisms such as Bolsa Família. But I believe this is possible, but if we do not take structural action against inequality, we are going to have problems. Maybe some of the ones that we have taken in Brazil are not the exactly correct one, but we have not missed the end game, right? And if we do not think about it, we run the risk of eradicating extreme poverty in the world in 20 years, but still being in a position of a high inequality in 100 years, still using Bolsa Família and programs the like, because of inequality. We need to think about a longer deadline and an economy that is that has a very high level of inequality. It generates a lot of poverty. The challenge, the fiscal challenge, grows too much if the primary distribution of income is too precarious. I believe that we do need to think about the short term, but also the long term challenge, which is fighting inequality. So I'd like to thank Magdi for his words, and I'd like to say, am I going to be part of this generation that is going to change and conquer extreme poverty? I'll be very happy if I am able to do so. Thank you.